Welcome to the Tank Podcast. In this week's episode, Matteo Pini spoke to multi-instrumentalist Lorraine on her ominous upcoming album I Killed Your Dog. Joining the conversation was her puppy Icon.
The album, in my view, has a kind of like intensity and almost confrontational attitude in the lyrics. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
What's that coming from?
Well, I think that's always like been a part of me and my personality. I feel like I'm I don't know, just trying to show more of that because I feel like it shows up in the live show a lot. And I'm just weary of like, I don't know, everybody's been so kind about fatigue and it's been really nice. And I feel really grateful. But also I'm just sort of noticing like, the way that it's handled and talked about and how, I don't know, certain kinds of experimental music can be like treated really carefully. And like, I don't want to be in a situation where I end up like looking back years from now and I'm like, oh, I've somehow become like separate from the world. You know what I mean? Like I'm in these like very particular kind of spaces and it's like I'm being like shielded from real life. And, especially coming from museum worlds and like the art world in general, honestly, that's like a big part of my life, but I'm also very skeptical of it. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to be I'm going to show the other sides of me and like maybe that will like protect my music from being like handled too carefully.
Yeah. There's a sense that this album is like grounded in some like reality. Not to say that fatigue wasn't, but there's a newfound sense of like, for me, bodiliness and like embodiment in a way. I do have to address the elephant in the room. Dogs.
Yeah.
So I feel bad talking about dead dogs while I'm looking at a very
I know, it's very perverted. I mean, that was sort of my experience making the whole record, was just like singing about dead dogs in front of like dogs I love. So it's okay. He's been tested. I've played it a couple times just to make sure he wouldn't get offended.
Yeah, we wouldn't want that now, would we?
No.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a bit about what the idea or the symbol of the dead dog means to you.
Well, I mean, it was like kind of weird when the song came first. I remember like sitting at my keyboard and I kind of like a lot of times I'll just kind of like free form lyrics it either comes out all at once fully formed or I'm kind of like listening to the sounds of the words before I make the words. But like I Killed Your Dog just like came out fully formed. It was just like I knew like that was the lyric from the very beginning. And it was like kind of shocking to me. And I was like, well, this is weird, but like it's coming from something. And then I was talking to Ben about just like what we were going to name the record at the end. And he was like, oh, you should just call it I Killed Your Dog, which I realized was a joke now. But at the time I was just like, oh yeah, that's perfect. Because it for me, it like summed up, I don't know. I wanted the title to make people feel something. And I wanted it to like feel bad because I don't know. I felt like a departure somehow. And like it, for me, it just asked a lot of questions. It's like, okay, like, why did you do this? Do you feel bad about it? Like, what did the dog do to you? What is your relationship to the person that owns the dog? Like, it just like, it casts a lot of questions. It casts doubt on me as a narrator, which I feel like I just got way more attention for fatigue than I anticipated. And I'm weary of like being a symbol for anything, So I'm like, yeah, like, don't believe me. And also I just wanted it to like feel like it does when you, I don't know, when you hurt people that you're close to and when you're, especially in thinking about relationships, I wanted that to be like immediately palpable. Like, I hate saying the title. Like, I don't like it, but that's why it felt right.
Yeah. But I'm also interested in this idea of I feel like culturally maybe we're reaching a point at which we're tired of things being relatable. Like maybe the idea of things relatable has allowed for certain like bad behaviors, and I think there's a lot of like power in being like, no, reject my authorship, reject the narrative that I'm trying to tell you.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I think there is a lot of like destruction in like being relatable.
Yeah.
But also, like, I don't know, I always try to toe the line. It's like I want to talk about my own experience only because I feel like that's all I have authorship over. And I want it to like resonate with other people, but also I don't want to like be too relatable.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's how we get to like celebrity, which I feel like is not good,
Yeah.
generally speaking.
I mean, I also noticed that in your live setup as well. It's not the traditional, person at the front, everyone around. You're all in a row, and it feels more democratic in that way. There's less of the sense of Lorraine is on the pedestal and like everyone takes a back seat. It's really cool.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's what I hope for. I hope it doesn't just look like I'm hiding. At some point, I definitely was just hiding, but now I feel like everybody just has a voice.
Yeah.
And that's
with a broken leg, I think it's quite hard to hide.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So obviously a lot of your songs have been made from, I know you're wary of using the word archive, but have been made with a kind of sound bank of audio recordings and conversations and stuff like that. I assume the sound bank saw continued use with this album. Was there a difference in how you're approaching like that kind of field recording or found sound?
Yeah, it somehow felt more intentional this time, or like intentional is the wrong word, maybe like sought after. The beginning of the record was like this recording. I was actually looking for another recording that I couldn't find, and if I really, really am in a bind, I'll start looking through my emails, which is like a disaster. So I was looking for something else and like couldn't find it, and I ended up finding this like Bill T. Jones recording because I thought it was amazing and like emailed it to myself. But usually I think for like some of the sound collages in Fatigue, I like barely remember making. I just like had like saved them, like working on something and didn't even think about them and just like filed them away. But these I like very much remember making. And I ended up recording like some of the band's voices or had them record themselves, which is like a difference in process. Yeah, I don't know. It felt I included my friend Josilia in I never remember the names of any of my songs. But yeah, I like included a recording from her that was like I knew I needed that recording instead of it being like this kind of loosey goosey intuitive sound collaging process.
And there's some fake commercials in there as well.
Yeah, I made that one actually a really long time ago. I think I like sent it to my friends because I was like, look at this thing I made. Like I'm like insane. But yeah, it just tied into like the early synth thing for me.
I think especially in the UK, there's this kind of culture of 1970s adverts being slightly creepy as well. Like
Yes.
Quite a rich tradition, and the same for America as well.
Yes.
I wanted to talk about like how did you know this project was finished?
I ran out of time. Quite frankly. Yeah, we did this session at Pulp Arts in Gainesville, Florida, which is not a place I ever thought I would find myself. And yeah, we had to finish the album and another project I'm working on. And we only had a set amount of days. And we usually just make a list, honestly, of just like a punch list. We reached the end of the punch list and I was like, I could make up more things and I hear things. I still I have to like not listen to it for a very long time now because I'll just like hear mistakes and things I want to fix and all of that. But like at a point you just have to cut yourself off.
Yeah. You've described your process before as like approaching songness. Do you feel like you approached a song here, or do you think it's still mellifluous and ambient and incomplete? I don't want to say incomplete because that seems uncharitable, but
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's approaching something. It's not there. Eventually I would like to actually write songs. Uh, maybe that'll be the next record. But I feel like I'm still in this kind of like middle area, which felt good when I was making it and feels right for this project. And, eventually I think I will actually like sit down and write real big girl songs.
Yeah. And in the album, you also reference Need Be from the prior album. And you also did that in Fatigue from the self-titled album. What motivates this kind of self-referential system?
I hope that like at the end of my life, you can look at the whole project and like keep finding connections and things that are going on. Like I want it to feel like a complete body of work that makes sense together. And that's like one way for me of doing that. And it's also just like a cool like compositional thing for me. Like when I start a new project, there's always like two things that I try to include, which is like something from the last record that I can like approach in a new way, and a reference to a birthday. And so I try to have like both of those things. It kind of happened organically with Fatigue. And then I was like, well, maybe I should keep this going.
Some of the lyrics on this new album have a kind of apocalyptic feel to it. Speaking about the end of days, are you ready? I mean, it's kind of dull to talk about, but was it a pandemic thing or was it just a general sense of oncoming apocalypse?
Well, I actually wrote that lyric a long time ago. I'm pretty dramatic in general. I just like have a flair for the dramatic. I just like that. But I don't know. I guess it's also a thing that I'm kind of noticing where I don't know. The personal for me ends up being like kind of like zoomed outward a lot. Like with Fatigue, it was like very much about myself, but ended up being about like the time I was living through. And I think that's kind of also happening here, where like it definitely feels like the end of the world. But like for me, I'm like thinking about like the end of my little world. I'm like the end of a friendship or a relationship or whatever, which like feels like the end of like life as you know it. But like when I listen to it now, all I can think about is just like everything that's happening. It's like kind of inextricable for me.
Yeah, yeah. In some ways, I guess that's the nature of memory as well. Just like the art you're creating at the time, and maybe you don't realize what you're writing about until you zoom out and take a bigger picture on it.
Totally. I mean, that's the point. Like for me, that's the point. It's like I couldn't have released Fatigue at any other time, but like that time. And I couldn't have released this record other than in any other time other than this time. So I'm glad I'm working with the label that lets me release it fairly quickly because like it would just feel wrong to do it later.
Yeah, and sit on a project that doesn't feel like it has relation to you anymore.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a bit about the influence of Black folk music on the album and how that manifested for you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I was thinking about like any particular music. I think I was more thinking about just like the origins of like rock music, which is like an extremely broad genre. And to me has a relationship to like folk music, and all these other, musics in the kind of like rock umbrella. And I used to play in bands that were more solidly like rock bands growing up, and that was like a big part of like the music I listened to. And so I was just thinking about like the who has access to that legacy, and just how that used to be like Black American music, and how that's been like like rock in general, that huge umbrella has been like kind of divorced from its origins. But also like all of this, I the new songs I was writing were like these folk songs, and I was like kind of surprised that that was happening. And so I was kind of like, I don't know, it seemed like it was just like coming from a very like deep intuitive place. And maybe the music I'm listening to, I don't know, but yeah. So I was thinking about all those things kind of all wrapped up.
Would you frame I Killed Your Dog as a rock album?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if I would, but there's a lot of rock music in it, I think, or like rockish music.
Yeah. Because I guess rock now has a kind of association with a certain number of things like whiteness, like oldness as well.
Yes,
Um,
totally.
so
Well,
that
that's what's so funny is like I don't like I there's a whole lot of music that I just kind of like didn't listen to, like, and these are all very different, but to me they all have a connection. Like Bob Dylan, Rush, like there's like all these like Pink Floyd, like I just like somehow just completely missed. And I listened to like a lot of music, but like really just well-known rock music I just have somehow like has just escaped me entirely. And so I feel like I'm kind of like making fun of myself on the album too, of just like this is stuff I just don't know for some reason.
I'm glad to hear it. I also missed out on Bob Dylan. It just like Teflon, it just slips right off me.
To hear more podcasts from Tank, you can subscribe on all major podcast platforms or follow us on SoundCloud. The theme music for this podcast is by Himera.